My father looked me straight in the eyes across the dinner table, his jaw clenched, and with that same condescending sneer he'd worn for most of my life, he said it again. "You're a loser, son. You'll never be anything but a disappointment." The words didn't sting like they used to. Not anymore. Not after everything I'd built in silence. But that it wasn't from years ago. No, it was just 10 months before the day he came knocking on my penthouse door, desperate, sweating, begging for help. And his so-called loser son handed him a black metal credit card with a $500,000 limit and told him, "Don't worry, Dad. I'll cover it all." He stood there speechless, broken. And for once, he had nothing cruel to say. But if you think this is some story of petty revenge or sweet success, it's not that simple. Because before that moment, before I built my company, before I proved everyone wrong, I was just a kid who couldn't get his dad to look at him with anything other than disappointment. This is not a fairy tale. It's the truth about family wounds, silent victories, and a son who outgrew the chains his father wrapped around him. You see, people love the idea of the underdog who wins. But no one talks about what it really feels like to watch the man who spent his whole life belittling you come to you, hat in hand, because his own pride burned everything he had to the ground. This story doesn't start in that penthouse. It starts in a 2-bedroom apartment with peeling paint, and a father who thought belittling his own son would somehow build character. It starts with rejection, pain, loneliness, and ends with power. But not the kind you think. Let me take you back to when I was 12 years old. That's when I learned that love in our house wasn't given, it was earned. Or at least, that's what my father believed. I was never enough. Not athletic enough, not smart enough, not ambitious enough. And certainly not like my older brother Dave. Dave could do no wrong. He played football, got straight A's. Dad practically polished the floor Dave walked on. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one. The one who read books and kept to himself. The one Dad always ignored. Until he needed someone to insult. By the time I was 16, I stopped trying to win his approval. Instead, I started building a life so silent, so invisible to him, that he didn't even notice what I was creating until it was too late. The moment he came to me for help wasn't just about money. It was the collapse of his ego, the unraveling of a man who thought control was love and dominance was parenting. But you'll understand that better when I tell you how I went from sleeping on a broken futon to wiring 6 figures in a single click, and why, despite all the pain when he needed me, I didn't slam the door. I let him in, not because I owed him anything, but because I had already won long before he ever knew he'd lost. Back then, I used to stay up late after school, not partying like my brother Dave or watching television like most kids I was building. I taught myself coding from a free online course on a second-hand laptop with a cracked screen. My room smelled like old socks and cheap pizza, and my desk was a wobbly nightstand, but I treated it like a command center. Every night, while my dad shouted at the television about how real men go out and get their hands dirty, I quietly built websites, affiliate pages, and small apps no one knew about. By senior year, I was making more online than my dad brought home from the construction site, but I didn't tell him. I couldn't. He would have just laughed and said, "That's not a real job, that's lazy man's work." So I kept quiet. I graduated high school without honors, without a party, and without a single proud look from him. I moved out at 19, not because I was ready, but because staying meant slowly dying inside. My first apartment had cockroaches, paper-thin walls, and no hot water, but it was mine. That same year, I launched my first online service for small businesses. It tanked, completely. Then I tried another, failed again. I burned through my savings, survived off ramen noodles, skipped rent payments, dodged calls from the landlord, but I didn't quit. I remembered every insult, every "you'll never amount to anything." Every time my dad introduced Dave as his real son and left me out of the conversation, that pain became fuel. I worked through holidays, stayed in on weekends, and lived like a ghost in my own life. But in silence, I built. I read every business book I could borrow, studied digital marketing until my eyes blurred. I failed a third time then, A fourth, but on the fifth try, something clicked. A client liked my work. He paid me $500. Then came another, $800. Then a website redesign for $2,500. By age 24, I was running a small agency. 3 freelancers under me. Monthly revenue cracking $20,000. I moved into a better apartment, bought new clothes, and for the first time in my life, felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the loser my father always said I was. But I still didn't reach out to him. I didn't go back for approval. I didn't need it anymore. Then, at 27, one of my clients introduced me to an investor. I pitched him an idea I'd been refining for months. A platform that simplified digital storefronts for local businesses. It wasn't sexy, but it worked. The investor gave me $150,000 seed funding. In 14 months, we scaled fast. I brought on a CTO, expanded our offerings, and started seeing numbers that didn't even feel real. By 29, I had a team of 14, an office in Midtown, and a startup valued at $9 million. And still, I told no one in my family. Not even my mom, who had long since learned to keep quiet to avoid conflict. They didn't know about the Forbes article, or the 6-figure quarterly payouts, or the penthouse I moved into with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. I lived in peace, far from the noise, far from the judgment. But the past has a funny way of showing up when you least expect it. One Tuesday afternoon, as I was reviewing performance metrics with my COO, I saw a name on my phone that made my stomach twist. Dad. I let it ring. Then it rang again. And again. I finally picked up on the 4th call. His voice was lower than I remembered. Tired. Broken. Hey, it's me. As if I wouldn't recognize the voice that haunted my childhood. He didn't ask how I was. Didn't mention the years of silence. He got right to it. I need help, son. It's your mother. She's sick, real bad. Insurance won't cover the treatments, and I don't have the money. He didn't cry. My father would never let himself do that. But I heard it in his voice, that crack, that tremble, that unspoken shame. The man who once told me I'd never succeed was asking for help. From me, the loser. I didn't say yes. Not yet. I told him I'd think about it. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed for hours, staring at the city lights, wondering what the right thing was. My younger self wanted to slam the door, to let him feel every ounce of rejection he'd ever given me. But the man I'd become, he was something else. Not just successful, not just rich. He was free. And with freedom came choice. I could let bitterness define me, or I could choose power, not to hurt, but to rise above it. The next day, I flew back to my hometown. Booked a suite for myself and visited the hospital. My mother barely recognized me at first, but when she realized it was me, she started to cry. I sat by her bed for hours. I didn't bring up the past. I didn't need to. She knew. She always knew. That night, I met my father at the motel he was staying in. It was cheap, dimly lit, and a far cry from the house he once ruled like a tyrant. He looked older than I expected. Grayer. Smaller. Like life had worn him down. We sat in silence for a minute. Then he finally spoke. I know I wasn't the father you needed. I didn't say anything. He continued, but I'm asking for your help. Not for me. For her. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a sleek black card. I slid it across the table. Use this. The limit's $500,000. It should cover everything. His hands trembled as he picked it up. Why are you doing this? He asked. I looked him in the eyes, the same eyes that once looked through me like I didn't exist, and said, because I remember what it felt like to need help and get silence in return. And I refuse to be that kind of man. He didn't speak after that, just nodded. But in that silence, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but closure. Power, not over him, but over the story I once let define me. The card worked. The treatments began. My mother got the care she deserved, and I paid every bill without a second thought. Not because I had to, but because I could. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to my father's chaos. I was choosing peace. I stayed in town for a few weeks, long enough to make sure Mom was stable. She got stronger, and her smile returned soft, grateful, and somehow even more beautiful through the wrinkles time had painted on her face. She asked me about my life, about where I lived, what I did. And I told her everything. Her eyes welled up when I told her I owned the company, that I built it from nothing, that I had people who respected me, who listened to me, who believed in me. "I always knew you would," she whispered. "You were never a loser. You just needed space to grow away from the noise." I nodded, but I didn't cry. I couldn't afford Tono yet, because there was still one conversation left. With him. My father and I didn't speak much those few weeks. He'd nod when we crossed paths. Say thanks. Once he even asked if I needed anything. The irony. But the wall between us never came down. It just stood there quiet, heavy, and old. Until the night before I left. I invited him to dinner. He was hesitant, but he came. Same diner we used to go to when I was a kid. Back when I thought pancakes and soda could fix broken things. We sat in the corner booth. He wore the same kind of flannel shirt he always did, and he kept tapping his spoon against the glass like he was buying time with noise. I finally said, "You want to ask me something? Just say it." He looked up. His eyes weren't angry anymore, just tired. "How'd you do it?" he asked. "How'd you go from nothing to that?" He wasn't mocking me. Not this time. There was something else in his voice. Respect? Regret? I said, "I stopped listening to the voice in my head that sounded like yours." He flinched. But I wasn't cruel about it. I just spoke the truth. For years, I believed I was worthless. "Because you said it so many times." I started repeating it to myself. But when I moved out the noise stopped, I heard my own voice for the first time. And it didn't call me a loser. It called me a builder. A fighter. Someone worth becoming. He looked away. The silence between us stretched long and jagged. Then he finally said, "I didn't know how to be a father to you. You were different. Not like Dave." I smiled, but not out of joy. "Exactly. And that's what made me strong." He nodded slowly. "I wish I'd seen it then." I leaned forward. "I don't need you to see it now. I already saw it for myself. That's what matters." He didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. Some wounds scar instead of healing. But that night, we both left the diner lighter somehow. I didn't hug him. He didn't cry, but we walked out without hate between us, and that was enough. When I got back to the city, everything felt different. Not because I had handed my dad a $500,000 credit card, but because I had faced him and left nothing unsaid. A few months later, I got a letter. Handwritten, no return address, just my name on the front. It was from him. Short, 5 lines. "You did good, son. Better than I ever did. I was wrong. I see that now. Thank you for what you gave your mother, and for not becoming like me." I folded the letter and kept it in my desk. Not for nostalgia, not for sentiment, but as proof that even the most stubborn men can soften with time and that, maybe, just maybe, he had grown too. Here's the part most people miss when they hear this story. They think the win was the credit card, the power, the moment I held the upper hand, but that's not it. The real win? I became a man I respected. I broke the cycle. I didn't use success to hurt. I used it to heal. Quietly. Completely. That's why this story isn't about revenge. It's about evolution. Because sometimes, the loudest kind of strength is choosing not to throw back the same punches you once received. It's handing over help to the person who least deserves I tanned, walking away knowing their shame isn't yours to carry anymore. My dad still lives in that small town. Still wears those same flannels. But he never called me a loser again. Because deep down, he knew. The moment I gave him that card, he wasn't just holding money. He was holding everything he said I'd never become. And he knew he was wrong.